Okay, let's unpack this. You probably know Colonel Tom Parker as the legendary manager of Elvis Presley. I mean, Elvis, possibly the biggest star popular music has ever seen, right?
Absolutely. Everyone knows the name.
But buckle up, because the story the sources reveal is, well, it's far stranger. It's much more complex than just Elvis's manager.
Definitely.
What if I told you his real name wasn't even Tom Parker, that he wasn't American, and that whole Colonel title
Yeah.
about as real as a prize from a carnival game?
That's exactly where this deep dive is heading. We're digging into Alana Nash's book, The Colonel, based on these excerpts we have, and it really it pulls back the curtain on this incredibly secretive figure, often controversial too.
Right. So we've got this source material. It's full of biographical details, these amazing anecdotes from people who knew him, glimpses into his business style, which was, let's say, unique, sometimes pretty ruthless.
Very unique.
So our mission today is to try and figure out who the man behind the Colonel persona really was.
Yeah. Looking at his origins, which are hidden, his time in the carnival world, which is fascinating, his management style, and, the big secrets he fought so hard to keep buried.
And while we're doing that, we want to explore what these sources tell us about the cost, the real cost, of living a manufactured life like that, and what it meant for his relationship with Elvis.
That dynamic is key. It's complex, kind of fraught sometimes.
It's a story, honestly, packed with aha moments, and some turns that are, frankly, a bit disturbing.
It really is. So where do we start? The story, as these sources lay it out, begins way before the spotlight, way before Elvis. It starts in Holland.
Exactly. The man we know as Colonel Tom Parker was actually born Andreas Cornelis van Kuyk, September 13, 1909, in Breda, Holland. His dad was a fisherman.
And the sources say he was the first boy in the family to survive infancy in about 9 years, so he was apparently really doted on, especially by his older sisters.
Growing up, his world seems to have revolved around the stables beneath their home and, crucially, the local fair, the kermis.
Yes. The sources really highlight this early fascination. He'd apparently cut school just to hang around the fairgrounds, the circus. Even practiced animal acts with the horses in the stables below their house.
And even then, the book mentions, he paid attention to his clothes, had this sense that he was somehow better than the people around him.
Interesting, isn't it? You already see that little spark of the showman, maybe? A desire for something more.
Definitely. Then there was this brief job he had, loading and unloading ships in Rotterdam. He lived with an uncle. Apparently, he hated it.
Yeah, the source describes him finding that kind of regimented life, all the rules and structure, just really restrictive. He didn't fit in.
And this is where things get, well, really mysterious. Around 18 years old, he just leaves Holland, abruptly.
The book says he told his uncle he was off to seek his fortune, maybe America, but didn't tell his parents, didn't tell his siblings, just gone.
And it gets weirder because the sources point out there's no official record of him on any passenger lists crossing the Atlantic.
Right. So speculation is maybe he worked his way over as a crew member, or maybe came in through Canada like Halifax. We don't know for sure. But however he did it, it was secretive and permanent.
And this secrecy, according to the source material, becomes the defining thing. It's why he could never go back to Holland.
Exactly. And the book digs into this really dark possibility that this lifelong need for secrecy might be connected to an unsolved murder back in Breda.
Wow.
Yeah, a woman named Anna van den Enden. She was a neighbor. Their families knew each other. Their interests overlapped. Now, the sources are very clear. He was not named in the police report for her violent death.
Okay, important distinction.
Very. But the timing of his sudden secret departure lines up almost perfectly with the aftermath of that murder. So the theory explored in the book is that the fear, maybe just the fear of being questioned or somehow linked to it, even remotely, is what drove him away and kept him silent forever.
That's heavy. So this potential shadow hangs over him as he arrives in America, maybe sometime in the mid to late 1920s. And where does this young guy, Andreas van Kuyk, with this huge secret, go?
Straight into the carnival circuit. Like the
Yeah.
sources literally say he joined the first carnival he come to in West Virginia.
And that world. It was perfect for someone trying to disappear, wasn't it?
Absolutely perfect. As the source puts it, nobody cared if you had a passport or not. It was a world of outsiders, drifters. The book uses terms like hustlers and cons, and this is where Andreas van Kuyk starts becoming Tom Parker.
He must have felt instantly at home. The sources really emphasize this lifelong connection he had to the carnival world. Always preferred hanging out with concessionaires, sideshow people, stayed active in the Showman's League his whole life.
Yeah, he learned the ropes there. Picked up skills from guys like P.Z. Hoffman networking, smooth talking, and Sam Settlemare. These were his people.
Then there's this really confusing bit about his time in the U.S. Army. The sources mention conflicting stories.
Totally conflicting. There are photos he supposedly sent home suggesting he served, but then there's no clear official record under the name Tom Parker. The book even mentions one record popping up that identifies him as a psychopath.
And get this detail from the source.
Yeah.
The date he went AWOL, absent without leave, September 27, 1932. It's the exact same day the Ringling Brothers Circus pulled into Pensacola, Florida, where he was supposedly stationed.
Whoa. So it connects his, let's call it brief and murky military stint directly back to the carnival life. Maybe explains all those elephant stories he used to tell later on.
Right. Another big step in forging this new American identity was getting married,
Right.
1936, to Marie Mott Ross-Sayre.
She was older, had been married before, had a son, Bobby Ross, and the sources explore the motivations. Maybe it was partly for immigration convenience, maybe some genuine affection, too. It's hard to say.
She was known as an amazing cook, apparently. But the book also mentions she struggled with kleptomania. It doesn't shy away from these details.
No, it doesn't. And there's that interesting quote included from Byron Raphael, who worked for Parker later. He said he got the impression Parker was asexual, just as another layer to the puzzle of his personal life.
And her son, Bobby Ross, apparently spent summers working the carnival circuit with them.
Yeah. And it's around this time Parker starts dabbling in management, working with people like the singer Gene Austin.
And this is where he forms that core belief, right? The one the sources say guided his whole career. Managers last longer than the stars.
That's the one, a very telling philosophy.
Which perfectly sets up how this carny showman starts climbing the ladder in the music business. He lands this job, seemingly legit, at the Hillsborough County Humane Society in Tampa.
Yes, but the sources reveal he basically used it as a cover, a way to promote country music concerts on the side for his own profit. And it was through this respectable job that he started meeting people, developing this obsession with Hollywood power players, like the producer Hal Wallace.
But the real breakthrough in music management came with Eddie Arnold, the country star, back in the 1940s.
Right. And the sources paint this picture of relentless promotion, sleeping in a smelly truck, setting up shop in a hotel lobby, and pretending it was his office. Classic Parker hustle.
And this is when he starts insisting on being called Colonel, isn't it?
Exactly. Not from the army, obviously. It was purely for show. To give himself an air of authority, legitimacy, a fake title for a world that maybe respected that sort of thing.
The book also mentions accusations starting around then.
Yeah.
Exploiting connections with record companies like Hill and Range, execs like Steve Scholes at RCA, for maybe questionable song publishing deals.
Yeah, getting cuts of publishing he maybe wasn't entitled to. You see the pattern of sharp, maybe unethical business practices starting right there.
Yeah.
Eddie Arnold eventually fired him in 1953.
And then he sees Elvis Presley on the Louisiana Hayride.
The moment that changes everything. And according to the sources, Parker's first thought wasn't necessarily, wow, what a talent. It was more like, this kid can make me a very rich man. That was his focus.
Pure potential. Financial potential.
And he moved incredibly fast. The sources detail how he aggressively went after Elvis's contract, getting it from Sam Phillips at Sun Records for $35,000.
RCA helped fund that, but Parker always spun it like it was his money.
Really?
Yeah.
Part of building his own legend as the guy who made it all happen, solidifying his control from day one.
And then he just unleashes all those carny skills on Elvis's career, but on a massive national scale, using RCA's muscle, the William Morris Agency.
Turning Elvis into a brand almost instantly. Licensing deals for everything imaginable. He made Elvis the biggest seller, the highest paid TV performer, overnight. It was astonishingly fast.
It's such a contrast the source is present, this undeniable genius for marketing and promotion, versus what seems like a total lack of real understanding or maybe just appreciation for Elvis's actual musical talent, his artistry.
It seems secondary to the business side, yeah. He was meticulous about crafting Elvis's public image, controlling it completely. Sometimes, the sources suggest, hiding parts of Elvis's real personality.
And yet, there's that really touching letter the book mentions from Elvis to Parker, where he says, "I love you like a father."
It shows the complexity of the relationship.
It really does. Which makes it even more jarring when the sources reveal Parker was constantly making these hidden side deals throughout their entire time together. Deals that benefited Parker directly, often secretly, sometimes at Elvis's expense.
That pattern again. His control extended everywhere, including Hollywood. The sources talk about his negotiations with Hal Wallace, demanding huge fees, top billing for Elvis, no questions asked.
And those weird office tactics the book mentions? Putting his assistant Arthur Hooton literally in the shower during a meeting. Greasing doorknobs.
Yeah. Apparently to keep executives off balance, gain the upper hand, pure psychological gamesmanship, and insisting on that technical advisor credit on the movies. Just pure ego, reinforcing his own importance.
So he builds this whole empire on control, image, and, let's be honest, manipulation. One of the biggest moves, strategically detailed in the sources, was pushing Elvis into the Army in '58.
Yes, the book lays out his thinking. Make Elvis look like a patriotic, all-American boy. It helped clean up his somewhat rebellious image from the early days, and Parker promised him, "You'll come back an even bigger star."
Which he did. But there's that poignant detail the sources bring up. Parker couldn't visit Elvis while he was stationed in Germany.
Right. Too close to Holland, too close to that hidden past. A direct consequence of the secret Andreas Van Dyke was still carrying.
That relationship between them. The sources track how it evolved into this really tangled father-son thing. Elvis often seemed subservient, even when he was getting frustrated.
Frustration he apparently dealt with increasingly through pills numbing the anger.
And Parker, according to the sources, wasn't above using his own health scares heart problems to manipulate situations. He also seemed genuinely terrified of dying, especially after having heart attacks himself.
Then came the Vegas era, starting in '69. The sources present this as maybe Parker's ultimate carny triumph.
Turning the lobby of the International Hotel into basically a circus sideshow?
Exactly, a Barnum and Bailey extravaganza of Elvis merchandise and promotion. It's seen as one of his most brilliant, if maybe slightly tacky, campaigns. Pure Parker.
But Vegas.
Yeah.
It also massively amplified his gambling addiction, didn't it?
Oh, hugely. The sources report he was losing staggering amounts of money, night after night, just hemorrhaging cash at the casino tables.
And here's where the exploitation becomes really stark. The book details how the casinos got their money back.
By taking huge chunks of Elvis's performance fees, Parker's losses were essentially being paid off by Elvis working constantly.
That gambling addiction, as the source explores it, just fueled this relentless need for more shows, more tours, no matter what shape Elvis was in.
His attitude to gambling was apparently weird too, described as disciplined in how he played, but finding losing funny while winning was serious business. And there were rumors, the sources note, about mafia debts being covered by Elvis's earnings.
This is just a downward spiral.
Right.
And as the '70s went on, Elvis's health, his drug use, it got worse and worse.
There's that one specific, horrifying incident recounted in the sources. Parker sees Elvis backstage, barely conscious, moaning, a doctor frantically trying to revive him.
And instead of stopping the tour, getting him serious help, what does Parker say? The quote in the book is chilling.
Just as long as he can keep doing the dates, we don't have to
Right.
worry. Just, wow. Business above all else, above the man's life, seemingly.
That quote really says it all, doesn't it? This period also saw tensions rising with Elvis's entourage, the Memphis Mafia. And then, after Elvis died in 1977, major legal battles with the estate, led by Priscilla Presley.
Yeah. Speaking of Elvis's death, the sources describe Parker's reaction as odd. Immediately focused back on business, famously wore a Hawaiian shirt to the funeral.
Despite claiming grief publicly, Vernon Presley, Elvis's dad, apparently agreed to let Parker continue managing things initially.
But those lawsuits from the estate were what finally blew the lid off Parker's secrets after all those decades.
His illegal immigration status, the army desertion, it all came out.
The settlement eventually let him keep millions he'd already made, but he had to return a lot of Elvis memorabilia.
And that original mystery. Why he completely cut off his family in Holland. The sources emphasize just how baffling that was to them. They had no idea why he vanished.
And the book circles right back to that potential link to the Anna Van den Enden murder 60 years earlier. It reinforces the theory that that event, or the fear surrounding it, was the reason for the lifelong secrecy, the inability to ever go home.
The source even suggests this kind of second tragedy. The possibility that Parker lived his whole life haunted by this, maybe thinking he was wanted or implicated.
When he might not have even been mentioned in the police report at all. Imagine carrying that fear, possibly needlessly, for a lifetime.
It's a profound thought. His final years, the sources say, were spent doing what he always did, in a way. Gambling heavily in Vegas, even after a stroke, still connected to his carny roots. He died in 1997.
And his death brought out those conflicting views again, right? The eulogies mentioned in the source material reflected both sides. Some remembered a kinder, emotional Parker, others focused squarely on the exploiter.
So pulling it all together from these sources, what we have is this incredibly complex, almost unbelievable character, Andreas von Kuyk, hiding behind the persona of Colonel Tom Parker.
A brilliant marketer, undeniably, but ruthless. He built an empire on a foundation of secrets and control.
He comes from nothing. An immigrant hiding his past, manages the biggest star on the planet. But he's haunted. And his own issues, especially the gambling, seem to drive him to push Elvis relentlessly, arguably contributing to Elvis's own tragedy.
The paradoxes the sources highlight are just stunning. The guy pushing Elvis's patriotic army service is an illegal immigrant and a deserter himself.
The manager making millions, only to gamble it away. The supposed animal lover who treated people, including Elvis, like commodities.
Exploiting the staff, his stepson, and ultimately the king himself.
It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it?
Hmm.
What does this whole story, as told through these sources, tell us about identity? How much we can shape it and what the cost is?
The way to secrets, too. And ambition. Where's the line between drive and destruction?
And specifically in entertainment, that blurry line between masterful showmanship and outright exploitation.
Hmm.
How much of the Colonel was real? How much was an act?
And maybe the biggest question. What was the true, lasting cost of maintaining that facade, not just for Andreas van Kuyk, but for Elvis Presley, the person whose life became inseparable from the Colonel's world?